Frank Fisher thought he understood survival until he found his CEO trying to burn it all down. Late night at Warren Dynamics. Empty corridors, darkened offices. Frank just wanted to grab forgotten project files and get home to his sleeping daughter. But then he smelled it, smoke drifting from the rooftop where no one should be. He followed the scent and stopped dead. There stood Nicole Warren, the untouchable CEO who commanded boardrooms and built empires from nothing, barefoot in her gold blazer, tears streaming down her face as she fed documents to the flames like she was destroying the evidence of her own existence. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Frank Fisher's footsteps echoed against polished concrete floors that had been cleaned by people who arrived before sunrise and left after midnight. People like him. People who didn't matter enough to have corner offices, just titles and responsibilities: operations manager, office 4C, father of one, widower. He hated that last word most of all. The elevator hummed its ascent, and Frank checked his phone. 10:23 p.m. Lily would be asleep by now, probably curled up in her Aunt Sarah's guest room with Mr. Whiskers, the stuffed cat that had belonged to her mother. Good woman, Sarah. She never asked questions about why Frank worked late. Never mentioned the way his hand sometimes shook when he dropped Lily off, or the fact that he still wore his wedding ring even though Emily had been gone for 743 days. She just hugged him, told him to take his time, and promised to read Lily the bedtime story about the brave little girl who could talk to stars. Frank stabbed the button for the 12th floor. He'd left the Morrison analysis on his desk, 47 pages of operational projections that Nicole wanted by tomorrow's 8 a.m. executive briefing. Because Nicole Warren always wanted everything yesterday, and she didn't care that Frank's morning started at 5:45 with a small girl who needed breakfast made and hair braided and a packed lunch with the crusts cut off exactly right, and a hug that lasted until Lily decided to let go. No rushing, no exceptions. The elevator doors opened to darkness. Frank had expected that. Motion sensors shut off after 10 p.m. to save energy, because Warren Dynamics prided itself on sustainability and innovation and all the corporate values that looked good on recruitment materials. He pulled out his phone, using its flashlight to navigate past workstations that looked like abandoned ships in the shadows. His desk was exactly as he'd left it, controlled chaos. Travel mug with coffee rings permanently stained into the stainless steel. Picture frame facing outward, Lily at 6, missing a front tooth, holding up a finger painting of their family. 3 figures. Dad with messy hair. Little girl with a lopsided smile. And Mama, made of yellow and white, labeled Mama with the angels. Frank grabbed the Morrison file without looking at the picture. He'd learned not to look too long. He was almost back to the elevator when he smelled it. Smoke. Not cigarette smoke. Not electrical fire. Something else. Paper burning. That specific acrid scent of documents curling into ash. Frank stopped, file folder pressed against his chest like a shield. The smell was coming from above. The 13th floor. Executive level. Rooftop access. Where people like him didn't go unless summoned, and even then only with advance notice and a very good reason. The smoke continued to drift through the air vents, thin but unmistakable. Frank told himself to leave. Get in the elevator, go home, pick up Lily from Sarah's place, carry her to bed without waking her because the girl was finally sleeping through the night now, 2 years after the funeral, and that felt like progress worth protecting. But the smoke didn't stop, and Frank had learned something in the past 743 days. Sometimes the smell of something burning is the smell of someone breaking. He took the stairs. The emergency exit was always unlocked from inside, fire code, and his footsteps were quieter on concrete than carpet. The 13th floor had a different quality to its darkness. The ceilings were higher here, the offices larger, the air heavier with the weight of decisions that affected hundreds of lives. This was where strategies were formed and partnerships were forged and companies were saved or dismantled with the stroke of a pen. The smoke grew thicker as Frank moved down the hallway. He passed the CFO's office, the VP of Engineering's office, the legal department's suite with its massive oak doors and leather furniture visible even in shadow. At the end of the hall, corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows, brass nameplate that caught the ambient glow from Seattle's skyline outside. Nicole Warren, Chief Executive Officer. The rooftop access door next to her office stood ajar. Frank stopped breathing. He pushed through the door and stepped onto the terrace. Wind hit him immediately, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of salt water from Elliott Bay and smoke from something closer. There, near the edge of the terrace by the glass railing, stood a woman surrounded by evidence of her own unraveling. Not the Nicole Warren he'd seen in quarterly meetings, the one who wore tailored suits like armor and delivered presentations with the precision of a surgeon. Not the CEO who'd taken Warren Dynamics from bankruptcy to industry leader in 7 years, who'd been profiled in Fortune and Forbes and every business publication that celebrated people who turned impossible odds into profit margins. This woman was barefoot. Her hair, usually pulled into a sleek low bun, hung loose past her shoulders, dark brown waves moving in the wind. She wore what looked like the same gold blazer and black slacks from today's board presentation, but the blazer was unbuttoned, the collar twisted like she'd started to undress for home and then forgotten halfway through. And she was burning documents. A metal trash bin sat at her feet, flames licking up from inside it, casting orange light across her face. In her hands, she held a thick file folder, confidential, judging by the red stamp on the cover, and she was feeding pages to the fire one at a time. Each sheet curled and blackened and disappeared into ash. Tears streamed down her face while she worked. Silent, relentless tears that caught the firelight and the city lights beyond, but she didn't wipe them away. Didn't seem to notice them at all. She looked like a woman trying to erase herself one document at a time. Frank knew he should leave. Knew that whatever private catastrophe he was witnessing wasn't meant for company eyes, especially not the eyes of a mid-level operations manager who barely registered on her radar. He should back away quietly, pretend he never saw this, never smelled the smoke, never climbed these stairs. But Frank Fisher had spent 743 days watching his daughter learn to live with a hole in her world that could never be filled. He'd spent 743 nights lying awake wondering if survival was the same thing as living, if going through the motions counted as healing, if pretending to be whole was close enough to actually being whole. He recognized that look on Nicole Warren's face. It was the same look he saw in his own mirror every morning at 5:45 a.m., before he put on the mask that made him functional for Lily. So instead of leaving, Frank Fisher did the unthinkable. He stepped forward, into the firelight, into the space where CEOs and operations managers didn't meet, into the moment that would change everything. "Ms. Warren," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the wind and the crackling flames. "Whatever you're burning, I think you might regret it in the morning." Nicole Warren's head snapped up. For one terrible second, their eyes met across the rooftop terrace, his filled with recognition, hers filled with something that looked like rage and relief and terror all at once. And then she said the words that would seal both their fates. "It's too late for regrets, Mr. Fisher. Some things are better as ash." She dropped the entire folder into the flames. Frank moved before his brain could stop him. 3 strides across the terrace, and his hand shot into the flames, grabbing the folder before it could fully catch. The heat bit into his palm, sharp, immediate, but he jerked the file free and dropped it to the concrete, stomping out the embers that clung to the edges. "What the hell are you doing?" Nicole's voice cracked, raw and furious. "Stopping you from making a mistake you can't undo." Frank kicked the trash bin over, scattering burning papers across the terrace where they couldn't do more damage. "Whatever this is. You don't know what this is." She stepped toward him, and in the scattered firelight, Frank saw her face clearly for the first time. Exhausted. Hollowed out. A woman who'd been holding something too heavy for too long. You have no idea what you just. Then tell me. The words hung between them in the smoke and wind. Nicole stared at him like he'd spoken a language she'd forgotten existed. Her hands trembled at her sides. For a moment, Frank thought she might order him off the rooftop, threaten his job, call security. Instead, she laughed, a broken, terrible sound. Why? She whispered. Why would you possibly care? Because I know what that face looks like. Frank's voice came out quieter than he intended. The one you're wearing right now. The one that says you're so tired of carrying it alone that burning it all down seems easier than asking for help. Something shifted in Nicole's expression. The CEO mask cracked further. She sank onto the concrete ledge by the railing, head in her hands. My husband killed himself 3 years ago. December 14th. Left a note apologizing for the life insurance policy he'd canceled 6 months earlier to pay off gambling debts I didn't know existed. Her voice was flat, mechanical. The company was struggling. I made a decision, cut corners on a safety compliance report to save the contract that kept us afloat. We fixed everything within 6 months. No one got hurt. But someone found out. Frank lowered himself onto the ledge beside her, maintaining careful distance. They've been bleeding me for 2 years, Nicole continued. Small amounts. Untraceable. I paid because exposing it would destroy everything, the company, the jobs, the reputation I built back up after David died. But last week, they changed terms. They want control. Board seat. Access to proprietary systems. If I refuse, they release everything. She looked at the scattered, smoldering papers. So I was destroying evidence and planning to resign tomorrow. Claim health reasons. Disappear before the scandal breaks. Frank was quiet for a long moment. The city hummed below them, oblivious. My wife died in a car accident, he said finally. 7:43 days ago. T-boned by a drunk driver at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday while she was coming home from buying groceries. Lily was in preschool. I had to pick her up and tell her that Mama wasn't coming home. His throat tightened. For a year and a half, I've been teaching my daughter how to survive something that should have destroyed us. Some days I'm not sure I'm teaching her to live or just teaching her to pretend. Nicole turned to look at him. Really look at him. I'm not going to tell you what to do, Frank said. But I know what surrender looks like. And that, he gestured to the burned documents, that's not strength. That's just, giving them exactly what they want. What's the alternative? Nicole's voice broke. Fight? With what? With help. Frank met her eyes. With someone who understands what it's like to keep going when everything says stop. Nicole studied him for a long time. Then, slowly, she nodded. They stayed on that rooftop until dawn broke over Seattle, piecing together what remained of the evidence, building a plan from ashes and desperation. Neither of them noticed the cold. Neither of them mentioned that they'd crossed every professional boundary that mattered. Some pacts are made in boardrooms with handshakes and contracts. Others are forged in smoke and firelight by two people who've forgotten how to surrender. The bank transfers were hidden in plain sight, buried in operational expenses under vendor codes that technically existed but never quite matched the services rendered. Frank found the first one on Tuesday afternoon, cross-referencing payment ledgers against Nicole's private records she'd handed him in a manila envelope at 6:47 a.m. in the parking garage, both of them pretending the exchange was about quarterly projections. 12 transactions over 23 months. Always different amounts. Always routed through a shell company registered in Delaware. Always approved with Nicole's electronic signature, but never flagged because they stayed just below the threshold requiring secondary authorization. Whoever was bleeding her understood Warren Dynamics systems intimately. Frank created a separate spreadsheet on his personal laptop, working through lunch in his car where no one could see his screen. He traced the shell company to a registered agent, then to a P.O. box, then to a dead end that smelled like someone who knew how to stay invisible. But the pattern was there, payments always processed on the 15th of the month, always between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. when automated systems ran batch approvals. His phone buzzed. Encrypted message app they'd set up that first night. Any progress? N. Frank typed back, found the pattern. Working the thread. Need access to your email archives. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. After hours. My office. 9 p.m. Frank pocketed his phone and realized his hands weren't shaking. For the first time in 746 days, his hands were steady because they had purpose beyond just holding his daughter's world together. That night, he told Sarah he had a project deadline. She didn't question it, just hugged Lily tighter and promised her niece they'd make cookies. Lily waved goodbye from the doorway, Mr. Whiskers tucked under her arm, and something in Frank's chest pulled tight. The ease of the lie. How quickly he'd learned to compartmentalize. Nicole's office at night was different than in daylight, softer somehow, more human. She'd ordered Thai food, and they ate directly from containers while pulling up 5 years of correspondence, searching for the moment when normal business communication shifted into something darker. There. Nicole pointed to an email from 18 months ago. Innocuous subject line, compliance follow-up. But the sender address was masked, and the message contained a single line, we should discuss your Q3 reporting in person. They never sent follow-up, Nicole said quietly. But 3 days later, I received the first payment demand. Cash drop. Anonymous instructions. Frank screenshotted everything, building a timeline. They worked until midnight, then 1, their conversation shifting between evidence and small confessions, her husband's favorite restaurant, Emily's terrible singing voice, the weight of pretending to be whole. At 1:47 a.m., Nicole walked him to the elevator. Thank you, she said. Just that. But her voice carried more than gratitude. Frank drove home feeling dangerously awake. Alive. Like his blood had remembered how to move properly through his veins. The package arrived Thursday afternoon. Sarah called, confused. There's a delivery for Lily. From someone named Nicole Warren. Frank's stomach dropped. Inside the box, a robotics kit designed for young engineers, and a handwritten note on cream cardstock. For Lily, I heard from your dad that you ask the very best questions. Never stop asking. Never stop building. Nicole. Lily's face lit up like Christmas morning. Dad, is she your friend? Can she come over? Can she help me build the robot? Frank held the note, reading it twice. 3 times. Nicole had listened when he'd mentioned Lily's endless curiosity at 2 a.m. on a rooftop, remembered it, acted on it. The gesture was thoughtful. Kind. Intimate in a way that made professional boundaries feel like suggestions rather than rules. Maybe someday, sweetheart, he managed. But as Lily tore into the kit's instruction manual, Frank realized the truth. Nicole Warren wasn't just entering their investigation. She was entering their life. And he wasn't sure if that feeling in his chest was fear or hope or something infinitely more dangerous. The shell company's registered agent had a name, Voss Capital Management. Frank found it buried in a partnership dissolution agreement from 7 years ago, archived in Warren Dynamics legal database. Marcus Voss, co-founder, former CFO, forced out after disagreements over strategic direction. The severance package had been generous. The non-compete clause had expired 5 years ago. Frank called Nicole at 11:34 p.m., it's Marcus. The silence on the other end lasted 5 seconds. Then, come to my house. Now. Don't use the main entrance. Nicole's home wasn't what Frank expected. Not the sterile penthouse he'd imagined, but a craftsman in Queen and with overgrown hydrangeas and a porch light that flickered. She answered the door in jeans and a sweater, no makeup, looking more like a woman than a CEO. Inside, the house was frozen in time. Wedding photos still on the mantel. Men's jacket still hanging by the door. She saw him notice. I kept meaning to pack his things, she said quietly. 3 years later, and I still can't. They spread documents across her dining room table, the same table where she and David had probably shared meals, made plans, built a life that ended with a note and an empty bank account. Frank traced the paper trail. Marcus had been accumulating shares through proxies, positioning himself for a hostile takeover. The blackmail wasn't about money. It was about leverage. He wants the company back, Nicole said, pouring whiskey into 2 glasses neither of them had asked for. He's going to use my mistake to force a board vote. Paint me as unstable. Unfit. We have evidence of extortion. Evidence we can't use without exposing what he's blackmailing me for. She drank, and Frank saw how tired she was. Not just physically. Existentially. I'm so tired of fighting, Frank. Tired of pretending I'm strong enough to carry this alone. Frank took the glass from her hand, set it down. You're not alone anymore. Aren't I? Nicole's voice cracked. Everyone leaves, Frank. David left. My parents left. Everyone I've ever trusted has. I'm not leaving. The words hung between them, too heavy, too raw, meaning more than they should. Nicole looked up at him, and Frank saw the exact moment her walls crumbled. Saw the woman beneath the armor, scared, grieving, desperate for someone to see her and stay anyway. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her shampoo, see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Frank. His name was a question. A permission. He almost kissed her. Every instinct screamed to close the distance, to find comfort in another person's warmth after 749 days of sleeping alone. His hand came up, cupped her face, and Nicole's eyes fluttered closed. But then Frank thought of Lily. Thought of the robot kit on their kitchen table. Thought of his daughter asking if Nicole was his friend, her voice so hopeful it hurt. He pulled back. I can't. His voice was rough. Lily's been through too much. If we, and it doesn't work, she'll lose someone else. I can't do that to her. I can't risk her on something this fragile. Nicole's eyes opened. For one terrible moment, Frank thought he'd see anger. Instead, he saw understanding. You're a good father, she whispered. That's why I trust you. She stepped back, put professional distance between them. But when she handed him the documents to review, their fingers touched, and neither of them moved. The boundary was drawn. The line was clear. But they both knew they were already standing on the wrong side of it. Sarah's text came at 6:47 a.m. Saturday morning, food poisoning. Can't watch Lily today. So sorry. Frank stared at his phone, then at the stack of files he needed to review for Monday's presentation. Lily appeared in his doorway, Mr. Whiskers dragging behind her, hair a tangled mess. Is it pancake day? Change of plans, sweetheart. How do you feel about coming to Daddy's office for a few hours? Lily's eyes went wide. The tall building with all the computers. That's the one. She was dressed in 4 minutes flat. Warren Dynamics on a Saturday was a different beast, half empty, quiet, the hum of servers and determination. Frank set Lily up in the conference room with her tablet and coloring books, but within 20 minutes she was restless, wandering, asking questions about every piece of technology she encountered. "What's that?" She pointed at a server rack visible through a glass wall. "That's where the company's brain lives." "Can brains live in boxes?" Frank was formulating an answer when a voice spoke behind them. "They can if you build the right box." Nicole stood in casual clothes, dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, looking nothing like the CEO who commanded boardrooms. She smiled at Lily. "You must be the engineer who's building robots." Lily's face lit up with recognition. "You sent me the kit. I built the arm already. It can pick up crackers." "That's impressive. Most adults can't figure out the servo motors." Nicole crouched to Lily's level. "Would you like to see where we design the technology your dad helps manage?" Frank opened his mouth to object. Nicole had her own work, her own crisis, but Lily was already nodding enthusiastically, and Nicole was already extending her hand. They disappeared into the development lab. Frank followed at a distance, watching Nicole transform. She didn't talk down to Lily, didn't simplify. She explained circuit boards and coding languages, let Lily press buttons on test equipment, answered every why and how with patience Frank had never seen her display in executive meetings. "Why did you want to build things?" Lily asked, turning a prototype phone over in her small hands. Nicole was quiet for a moment. "Because when I was your age, someone told me girls couldn't be engineers. So I decided to become the person who makes the engineers possible." "That's smart." Lily looked up at her with complete seriousness. "Did it make you happy?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Nicole glanced at Frank, something unguarded flickering across her face. "It made me proud. Happy is more complicated." They spent 3 hours together. Nicole showing, Lily absorbing, Frank watching this woman he barely knew treat his daughter like she mattered, like her questions were profound instead of annoying. When they finally left, Lily chattered the entire drive home about circuits and leadership and how Nicole said she could be anything she wanted. At bedtime, after stories and tucking in, Lily caught Frank's hand. "Dad?" "Yeah, sweetheart. Is Nicole sad like we were? After Mama?" Frank's breath caught. "Why do you ask that?" "Because she smiles with her mouth but not her eyes. Like you used to." Lily squeezed his fingers. "But today, when she was showing me the computers, her eyes smiled too. Like yours do now sometimes." Frank kissed her forehead, turned out the light, and sat in the hallway outside her room with his back against the wall. Lily saw what he'd been trying to ignore. Nicole wasn't just helping him investigate. She wasn't just crossing professional boundaries. She was becoming part of the equation he'd been trying to solve for 752 days, how to live instead of just survive. And his 7-year-old daughter had just asked him if he was brave enough to try. The parking garage on Monday evening was nearly empty, just Frank's Honda and 3 other vehicles scattered across the shadowed concrete. Frank was loading his briefcase into the trunk when footsteps echoed behind him, deliberate and unhurried. "Frank Fisher." The voice was smooth, cultured, carrying the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Operations manager, widower, father to a 7-year-old girl named Lily. Recently promoted 3 months ago. Solid performance reviews. Clean record. Frank turned slowly. The man standing 6 feet away wore a tailored charcoal suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Late 40s, silver at the temples, the kind of handsome that came from expensive grooming and inherited bone structure. "Marcus Voss," Frank said. "Not a question. You've been doing your homework." Marcus moved closer, hands in his pockets, casual as a predator who knew his prey couldn't run. "I appreciate thoroughness. It's why I'm here, professional courtesy, one colleague to another." "We're not colleagues." "No, you're right. You're an operations manager making $78,000 a year, and I'm the man who built Warren Dynamics from nothing before Nicole convinced the board I was expendable. His smile sharpened. But let's not focus on hierarchy. Let's talk about your recent, extracurricular activities. Frank's pulse kicked up, but he kept his voice steady. I don't know what you mean. The late-night meetings. The encrypted messages. The way you've been digging through financial records you don't have authorization to access. Marcus pulled out his phone, swiped through screenshots, timestamps of Frank entering the building after hours, photos of him and Nicole in the parking garage exchanging files, metadata that told a story without context. You're playing a game you don't understand, Mr. Fisher. I understand perfectly. You're blackmailing Nicole to orchestrate a hostile takeover. Marcus laughed, genuinely amused. Blackmail. Such an ugly word. I prefer leveraging past mistakes for strategic repositioning. And before you get noble ideas about exposing me, consider this: you have no proof that would hold up in court. Everything you found is circumstantial. Everything I have on Nicole is documented, verified, and career-ending. She'll fight you. She'll lose. Marcus stepped closer, voice dropping. But you're a different calculation. Single father. Sole guardian. Working long hours, missing parent-teacher conferences, leaving your daughter with relatives while you play detective with your boss. He let the implications hang. One phone call to Child Protective Services from a concerned citizen, and suddenly there's an investigation into whether you're providing adequate care. Whether your recent behavior suggests instability. Whether Lily might be better off in a more stable environment. The threat landed like a fist to Frank's chest. You wouldn't. I won't have to. Back away from Nicole. Stop digging. Go back to being the devoted father who keeps his head down and his daughter safe. Marcus pocketed his phone. Or don't. But understand, I will destroy everything you've built to protect what's mine. Warren Dynamics belongs to me. Nicole stole it. I'm simply taking it back. Frank's hands clenched at his sides. Every instinct screamed to protect Lily, to step back, to choose safety over principle. This was the moment to walk away. Save his job. Save his custody. Save the fragile stability he'd constructed from wreckage. But then he thought of Nicole on that rooftop, ready to burn everything rather than keep fighting alone. Thought of Lily asking if Nicole was sad like they were. Thought of his daughter learning, every day, what it meant to survive something impossible. No, Frank said quietly. Marcus's expression hardened. Excuse me. I said no. Do whatever you're going to do. Make your calls. File your complaints. But I'm not abandoning her. You're risking your daughter for a woman you barely know. I'm teaching my daughter that some things are worth the risk. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, reassessing. Then he smiled, cold, final. You'll regret this, Mr. Fisher. He walked away, footsteps echoing into silence. Frank stood alone in the parking garage, hands shaking now, knowing he'd just made a choice that could cost him everything. But for the first time in 755 days, he'd chosen forward instead of just survival. Nicole was waiting in Frank's office at 7 a.m. Tuesday, standing by the window with her arms crossed, a printout clutched in her hand. She turned when he entered, and her face was pale with fury. Marcus sent this to my personal email. She thrust the paper at him. Tell me it's not true. Frank scanned the message, a detailed account of Marcus's parking garage conversation, framed as a courtesy notification that Frank was becoming a liability. The threat to Lily was laid out explicitly, documentation attached showing Frank's after-hours building access and unauthorized database queries. It's true, Frank said quietly. Then you're done. Nicole's voice cracked. You're off this investigation. You go back to your normal work, you stay away from me, and you forget everything you know. Nicole. I mean it, Frank. I won't let him use your daughter against you. I won't be responsible for you losing her. Frank set the paper down carefully. That's not your choice to make. Like hell it isn't. This is my mess. My mistake. My company. Her hands trembled. You have a child who needs you. I have nothing to lose. You think I don't know that? Frank's voice rose. You think I didn't spend the entire night weighing what this could cost? But if I walk away now, what am I teaching Lily? That when things get hard, you run. That you abandon people who need you to keep yourself safe. You'd be teaching her that her father puts her first. I'd be teaching her to live small. The words came out raw, louder than Frank intended. For 2 years, I've been teaching her survival. How to keep breathing when everything hurts. How to go through motions. But I've never taught her how to actually live, how to fight for something beyond just making it through the day. Nicole stared at him, tears tracking down her face. She could lose you. Marcus could follow through, and you could lose custody. Then I'll fight that too. Frank moved closer. But I won't lose myself by walking away from someone who needs me. I won't teach my daughter that love is only worth it when it's safe. The word hung between them. Love. Unintentional. Undeniable. Nicole's breath caught. Frank, we can't. Why not? Because it's complicated. Because we're both broken. Because it started in a crisis. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. Emily's been gone for 757 days. Every single one of those days, I've been telling myself that surviving was enough. That being a good father meant protecting Lily from anything that could hurt her, including me feeling anything for anyone else. You should protect her. I am protecting her. By showing her that people who've been broken can still choose each other. That moving forward doesn't mean forgetting what came before. His thumb traced across her knuckles. I'm not choosing you instead of Lily. I'm choosing a version of myself that's brave enough to risk something real. And I'm trusting that Lily deserves to see that version of her father. Nicole's resolve crumbled. I'm terrified, she whispered. So am I. She kissed him first, desperate, fierce, 3 years of loneliness colliding with 2 years of grief. Frank pulled her closer, and it felt like breaking and healing simultaneously, like every carefully constructed wall they'd built coming down in flames. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nicole rested her forehead against his. This is going to get worse before it gets better, she said. I know. Marcus won't stop. He'll come after both of us. I know. We could lose everything. Frank cupped her face, made her look at him. Or we could win. Together. Nicole kissed him again, softer this time. An answer. A promise. They were choosing forward. Whatever came next, they were choosing it together.
The emergency board meeting was called for Thursday at 2 p.m., giving Nicole less than 18 hours' notice. Marcus had moved faster than they'd anticipated, leveraging his proxy shares and 3 sympathetic board members to force the vote. The conference room on the 14th floor felt like a courtroom, 12 board members seated around mahogany, Marcus at the head opposite Nicole, and Frank positioned against the back wall with other department heads who'd been summoned to provide operational context. Marcus stood, projector already loaded with his presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for convening on short notice. What I'm about to present concerns the integrity and stability of Warren Dynamics leadership. The first slide was a financial chart showing the company's growth trajectory. Standard. Expected. Then the second slide, a photo of Nicole and Frank in the parking garage, timestamp visible, exchanging files at 6:47 a.m. For the past 3 weeks, Marcus continued, voice smooth as poison, Ms. Warren has been conducting a personal relationship with a subordinate employee, Frank Fisher, operations manager. This relationship has included after-hours meetings, unauthorized access to confidential records, and a pattern of behavior that suggests compromised judgment. Murmurs rippled through the board. Nicole's expression remained neutral, but Frank saw her hands clench beneath the table. Furthermore, Marcus advanced the slide to show the compliance report from 7 years ago, the one Nicole had falsified. I have evidence that Ms. Warren engaged in fraudulent reporting during the company's early financial crisis. She's hidden this liability for years, and when confronted, rather than address it transparently, she's enlisted Mr. Fisher to help conceal the evidence. The murmurs became exclamations. Board members leaned forward, skeptical gazes fixed on Nicole. My recommendation, Marcus said, is immediate resignation. Ms. Warren has served this company admirably, but her recent actions demonstrate she's no longer fit to lead. I'm prepared to step in as interim CEO, and I have partners ready to inject capital to stabilize any market uncertainty. The board chair, Richard Castellano, turned to Nicole. Ms. Warren, this is damning. Do you have a response? Nicole opened her mouth, but Frank was already standing. I have a response, he said, voice cutting through the tension. Every head turned. Marcus's expression flickered with irritation. Mr. Fisher, this is a board-level discussion. About accusations you fabricated to execute a hostile takeover. Frank moved to the front of the room, pulling out his own flash drive. May I? Richard nodded slowly. Frank plugged in, and his presentation replaced Marcus's. Marcus Voss has been blackmailing Ms. Warren for 2 years using the compliance report as leverage. Here are bank records showing 23 payments to a shell company he controls. Here are emails proving he orchestrated proxy share purchases to force this vote. And here, Frank advanced to the critical slide, are communications between Marcus and the original compliance auditor, showing he paid to have the falsified report resurface specifically for extortion purposes. The room erupted. Board members talking over each other, Marcus's face draining of color. You're lying, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm an operations manager, Frank replied calmly. I specialize in documentation. Every transaction, every email, every proxy vote, it's all here. And it's all been forwarded to the SEC and FBI as of 9 a.m. this morning. Richard Castellano stood, face grave. Marcus, is this true? Marcus looked between the board, Nicole, and Frank. Trapped. This is circumstantial. It's criminal conspiracy, Frank said. And you just tried to execute it in front of 12 witnesses. Security entered on Richard's signal. Marcus was escorted out, his protests fading down the hallway. The remaining board members sat in stunned silence. Richard looked at Nicole. Ms. Warren, we need to discuss your judgment. We will, Nicole said, standing. But first, you need to decide if you want a CEO who's human or one who's invincible. Because I can't be both anymore. The FBI arrived at 4:17 p.m., 2 agents in dark suits who took Marcus into custody in the building's lobby while employees whispered behind cupped hands. By 6 p.m., the story was breaking on financial news networks. Warren Dynamics CEO target of failed hostile takeover, former partner arrested for extortion. But the board reconvened at 7 p.m. without cameras, without press, with only the 12 members and Nicole seated at that same mahogany table. Frank had been dismissed, told to go home, but he waited in his office with the door cracked, unable to leave. Richard Castellano's voice carried down the hallway. Ms. Warren, Marcus's crimes don't erase the concerns about your judgment. You falsified a compliance report 7 years ago. To save this company. Nicole's voice was steady. We were 30 days from bankruptcy. I had 12 employees who'd taken pay cuts to stay loyal. I cut corners on paperwork, then spent 6 months and $50,000 of my own money fixing every safety issue. No one was ever at risk. No one was ever harmed. But you hid it. Because I was ashamed. Because I'd just lost my husband, and I was terrified that admitting one more failure would prove everyone right, that I couldn't handle this. That I was too broken to lead. Silence. Then another board member, Patricia Chen, spoke. And the relationship with Mr. Fisher? Is none of your business, Nicole said quietly. But since we're discussing judgment, let me be clear, Frank Fisher is the reason you still have a company. He could have walked away when Marcus threatened his custody. Instead, he risked everything to help me fight. That's not compromised judgment. That's integrity. You're his superior. And I'm also a woman who lost her husband 3 years ago and forgot what it felt like to be seen as anything other than a profit margin. Nicole's voice strengthened. Here's what I'm not going to do, apologize for being human. I won't apologize for grieving. I won't apologize for making one mistake under impossible circumstances. And I won't apologize for finding someone who reminds me that survival isn't the same as living. She stood, and Frank heard papers shuffling. So here's my ultimatum, Nicole continued. You accept that your CEO is a complete person, someone with trauma and relationships and humanity, or I resign tonight. I'll take my patents, my proprietary algorithms, and my relationships with our 3 largest clients. You'll have a company without a scandal, but you won't have a company worth leading. Your choice. The silence stretched so long Frank thought they'd called her bluff. Then Richard spoke, voice thick. Ms. Warren, sit down. Please. More silence. Then, we owe you an apology. We've expected you to be perfect. Invulnerable. We've benefited from your strength while ignoring the cost of maintaining it. That ends now. Patricia's voice joined in. You've led this company with remarkable vision. We'd be fools to lose you over the fact that you're human. Frank heard movement, voices overlapping in agreement. When Nicole emerged 20 minutes later, her eyes were red but clear. She found Frank waiting, and without a word, he pulled her into his arms. They voted unanimously to keep you, she whispered against his shoulder. Because they finally saw what I saw on that rooftop, Frank said. Someone worth fighting for. Federal charges against Marcus would take months to fully resolve. The board implemented new ethics policies. Nicole restructured her leadership team, creating space for transparency. But the real transformation was quieter, a CEO who stopped pretending invincibility was strength, and a single father who stopped believing survival was enough. They'd both learned the same lesson, that being broken and choosing to rebuild was the bravest thing either of them had ever done. 6 months later, Frank's new office had a window. Director of Operations came with corner real estate on the 11th floor, a title that still felt strange on business cards, and a salary that meant Lily could have the art classes she'd been asking about. But the best part was the view. He could see the building's entrance, watch employees arrive with coffee and ambition, and occasionally catch Nicole's car pulling into her reserved spot at 7:30 a.m. exactly. Warren dynamics had changed in measurable ways. New ethics policies. Anonymous reporting systems. Quarterly transparency meetings. Nicole had restructured leadership, promoting from within, building a culture where humanity wasn't a liability. Marcus's trial was ongoing, but the company had moved forward, stronger for having survived the crisis. But the unmeasurable changes mattered more. Saturday morning, Frank drove Lily and Nicole to Greenwood Cemetery, where Emily was buried beneath a cherry tree that bloomed pink every April. Lily carried a flat of purple pansies, Emily's favorite, and Nicole carried the gardening tools without being asked. "Hi, Mama," Lily said, kneeling on the grass. "I brought you flowers. And I brought Nicole. She's Dad's, girlfriend." She looked up at Frank for confirmation. "Girlfriend works," Frank said, throat tight. Nicole knelt beside Lily, showing her how to dig the small holes, how to nestle roots into soil, how to water gently. Frank watched them work together, his daughter and the woman who'd somehow become essential to their lives, and felt Emily's absence as keenly as ever. But alongside that absence was something else. Permission. Peace. "Your mom must have been amazing," Nicole said softly, "to raise someone as brilliant as you." "She was the best at hugs," Lily said matter-of-factly. "But Dad says you're really good at them too now." Nicole met Frank's eyes over Lily's head, and they shared a smile that held grief and gratitude in equal measure. That evening, in Frank's living room, their living room, since Nicole had started keeping a drawer here, leaving her things in the spaces Emily's absence had created, Nicole sat cross-legged on the floor with Lily's laptop open, teaching her basic Python. "See how the loop repeats the action?" Nicole pointed at the screen. "You're telling the computer to keep trying until it gets the answer right. Like you and Dad did with Marcus," Lily said, then frowned at her code. "Wait, why isn't it working?" "Because you forgot to close the parentheses. Small details matter." Frank watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee mug warming his hands. This scene 6 months ago would have felt impossible, another woman in their home, teaching his daughter, filling spaces that had been empty for 937 days. But impossibility had become their specialty. On his desk in the corner sat 2 framed photos. The first, Emily on their wedding day, laughing with her head thrown back, all joy and promise. The second, Lily and Nicole from last week, both covered in flour from a baking experiment gone wrong, both laughing with the same wild abandon. Frank had been terrified that loving Nicole meant betraying Emily. But looking at those photos side by side, he understood the truth: love doesn't replace what was lost. It simply makes room. Both women belonged in his life, one in memory, one in present tense. Both had taught him different versions of courage. "Dad!" Lily called. "Come see." "I made the computer say, 'Hello, Mama in heaven.'" Frank crossed the room, Nicole's hand finding his as he knelt beside them. On the screen, Lily's first program ran in an infinite loop, greeting the mother she'd lost and the future she was building simultaneously. Some stories end with closure. This one ended with a door left open, to grief, to joy, to the messy, beautiful work of building something new from broken pieces. And on Monday morning, Frank and Nicole would return to Warren Dynamics, where they'd continue leading with the same lesson, that strength isn't the absence of breaking. It's the choice to rebuild. Together.